Caitlin Clark is the only player in the history of the WNBA to achieve those numbers or better.
Sheryl Swoopes recently hinted that some players on the Indiana Fever are feeling frustrated with all the outside attention and might want to leave the team.
Then Sheryl Swoopes would be like, oh, okay, but you gotta have equity, right? Yeah, Sheryl Swoopes has equity in hating on Caitlin Clark. You know, she's been there, done that, keeps doing it, and it's not only about basketball, it's about her relationships with other players or perceived relationships with other players. You know, if somebody else said, I don't think that's dominating, I think dominating, you know, somebody my age said, I think dominating is 25 points, 28 rebounds, and 12 blocks, whatever. Back in the day, that was it.
Many speculated she was referring to Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, but there's also chatter about NaLyssa Smith. It's interesting because Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark seem to be close friends, and Kelsey Mitchell appears to enjoy her time with the Fever lately.
If you've ever been to a game, no. She's not only dominant, she dominates. She dominates the ball, dominates the other team's thought, dominates her own team's thought, dominates the crowd, dominates the entire area of the arena.
Some believe Swoopes is just making things up, but there's a point to consider regarding NaLyssa Smith. While she's a good player, her contributions to the team's success this season have been questioned. Ironically, when her box score numbers are lower, she often plays better for the team. She tends to be a volume scorer, but the Fever doesn't need that right now. Additionally, Dejanai Carrington doesn't seem to be a fan of Caitlin Clark, who is Smith's girlfriend.
It's huge. You know, just this is what we've been hoping for forever. So, you know, it's fun to play in front of these games. You know, like you never get used to it. Just always showing up and playing in front of sold out crowds. And I mean, shout out Caitlin.
Clark's brother is very supportive on social media, but sometimes his comments don't come off well. Despite all this, NaLyssa Smith recently spoke about playing in front of a record crowd, showing she still has a positive outlook amidst the speculation. People are definitely going to say that was not a genuine shout out to Caitlin Clark, and it's clear she was just joking when she mentioned how you never really get used to playing in front of big crowds. It's a tough spot because while it seems like she means it, it's hard to express what you really feel in those moments.
But look, it's Sheryl Swoopes, and we all understand. Well, let me read to you. Nobody was talking about Sheryl Swoopes before the WNBA season started. This is what I'm talking about right here. But she's figured out a way to jump back into the spotlight for the first time since retiring in 15 years. She's staying relevant by saying dumb things about the next popular women's basketball player, the most popular women's basketball player on the planet, while clearly falling into the trap of becoming addicted to her social media mentions filling up, even if the overwhelming majority of the population disagrees with everything she's saying. See, I don't have a problem being on the side of the overwhelming majority disagreeing with what you're saying, or I don't have a problem if we're talking about basketball.
After all, she had a solid game with 16 points, but it looked like she was either reading something or just looking down. Sometimes it's easy to get distracted or look away from the camera while trying to focus on the game. There were comments about her looking at a stat sheet more than the audience, which is interesting, but honestly, she wasn't reading from anything. They played in front of a huge crowd of 20,000 fans. Having scored 16 points in that atmosphere must have felt amazing for her, especially since she probably hasn't played in front of crowds like that since her college days at Baylor University.
You know, you never want, I guess, I don't know, but you think you would 40 years later, or however many years later, 15 years later, you know, you never really want people to take your spotlight immediately. You know, most guys that get done coaching the next year, if the team does well, they're not that happy about it. Or if a team wins a national championship the year after you graduate, you feel some kind of way about it. But let's be honest, 15 years later, you're kind of like, eh. People say to me all the time, you don't want Indiana to win because you're not the coach. I go, well, maybe for 10 minutes, but as you move it along, who really cares?
Speaking of Baylor, I think she won an NCAA championship there in 2019, so there would have been plenty of fans back then too. It's just funny how every time she plays, the attention seems to follow her.
Sometimes you splat. The post-Sheryl Swoopes career has splat. She tried coaching, but she was so awful as a human being. I mean, the stories of her coaching, she got fired as an African-American woman at a Catholic school, Loyola, for being god-awful to players. She didn't win, But that ain't why she was fired. She was just ridiculous, mean, nasty.
It seems like NaLyssa Smith is in a good place right now. She won a championship in college and is now headed to the playoffs with the Indiana Fever. I bet she's excited to play in front of big crowds again, just like in her college days.
And so, adios. As an African-American woman, do you know how hard it is to get fired from a job, particularly a basketball job? I mean, I get it. You're going to tell me that that's some kind of racist or sexist. But
one interesting storyline is that she'll face off against her friend Caitlin Clark in the Fever in the playoffs. Some people think Smith struggles against the Connecticut Sun, but I thought she did a solid job guarding Alyssa Thomas last time. It should be a great series to watch. It's good to see the Indiana Fever players putting social media issues behind them.
Oh, that awfulness goes on to disparaging others, and good for her.
Early in the season, there were some problems, but it's easier to deal with that stuff when the team is winning. I think the Fever does a better job than most teams at helping players handle social media.
I mean, let's be honest. We're talking about Sheryl Swoopes, so she's happy, but let's also be honest. Caitlin Clark has been the best thing, the most dominant thing to happen to the WNBA ever.
You rarely see them getting into Twitter feuds like some other squads.
Remember, there's been good players come out of college. Really good, high-profile players. Hell, Rebecca Lobo felt like Taurasi, that crew, was on our TV every minute in March, but nobody really cared. We'd seen it. Nobody really cared.
The Las Vegas Aces, Minnesota Lynx, and Seattle Storm all seem to have a pretty level-headed approach on social media.
Sheryl Swoopes, you're wrong. It's the most dominating thing we've seen, whether it's in the arena, outside the arena, on the court, with the media. It's so dominant, in fact, that legends like Sheryl Swoopes are so damn jealous, they just can't stop themselves from stupidity.
The New York Liberty and Connecticut Sun have a few more vocal personalities, but overall, most of the top teams have players who keep things professional online.
The Indiana Fever, they assigned Caitlin Clark a group of babysitters, her teammates. They are tasked with trying to prevent the petulant and entitled WNBA star from bickering with referees.
Sydney Coulson is kind of an exception. She's more of an entertainer than a typical player. But for the most part, the WNBA's social media game is pretty classy these days.
Hats off to the Fever. Great job. You've won your 20th game. Awesome. You've improved 7 games from a year ago. You got 1 game left to play. But more importantly, Clark finished the game without picking up her 7th technical foul, which would have resulted in a suspension for the regular season finale against the Washington Mystics on Thursday.
It seems the teams at the bottom of the standings are dealing with the most dysfunction and social media drama. As the WNBA continues to grow, players will inevitably face more criticism and hate online, even if it's not as extreme as what NBA stars face.
She can say it, she can talk it, she can think she's doing, but it's not. It's about being black, being being white, being straight, which Sheryl Swoopes is, and it's jealousy.
Fortunately, it doesn't appear to be impacting the Indiana Fever's chemistry. Did you see how hyped the bench was when Victoria Saxton hit that 3? Lexi Hull, Aaliyah Boston, Damiris Dantas, NaLyssa Smith, Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, they were all jumping around celebrating their teammate.
So I get what Sheryl Swoopes feels like. I get she does not give a rat's ass one way or the other, whether or not some guy on a podcast or some guy in the media disparages her comment. I do. My problem is her comments are never about basketball.
That doesn't scream locker room issues to me. Every team has its little annoyances and disagreements, but overall, the Fever seems like a very likable group. It's good to see NaLyssa Smith putting the Sheryl Swoopes rumors to rest with her positive attitude. The reality is, as the league gets bigger, players will face more hate, but the Fever is handling it well and keeping things fun. You love to see a team that genuinely enjoys each other's success on and off the court.
It's okay to be a hater in sports. Like, hating in sports is a part of the game. Like, I like when our fans are so engaged and so passionate that they just don't like the other team. But being racist, sexist, and violent with your words, come on now, what are we doing?
The Atlanta Dream is a WNBA team with a bit of a controversial history. One of its co-owners has been criticized as possibly the least effective owner in sports.
Group cannot be a representation of what the WNBA would want in their league. This is our league. This was built, like, I feel like as a women's basketball historian myself, I've been watching since I was 5. I was here before the league started. as a lot of the fans on social media feel the same.
Back in 2020, the franchise removed an owner due to her Republican views during a time when social activism was on the rise.
That ain't a representation of us. Y'all not like us. They not like us, okay? So please don't confuse me saying motivated by hate by meaning hating on a team the way a normal, die-hard fan would.
Although the team claims to have good attendance, they play in a small venue that can only accommodate 3,500 fans. Crowds tend to show up mainly when star player Caitlin Clark is playing.
For instance, let me just give you some examples. A die-hard Falcons fan can hate the Saints, but they would be going a little bit too far if they created nude AI pictures of Saints players and then sent them to the Saints players' families. That's what Caitlin stans have done to Angel Reese.
Recently, the owner made some remarks about Clark's fans, accusing them of being racist and sexist.
A diehard Tennessee Vols fan could have hated our UConn Huskies, but they would have been going way too far if they sent death threats to the UConn players. And that's what they've done. That's what Caitlin stans have done.
This comment is surprising, especially since Clark has been successful in drawing large audiences and viewership across different platforms.
A die-hard Celtics fan could hate the Lakers. And you know what? If we being honest, that Celtics fan base has definitely gone too far with some of their racist remarks and their treatments of players. It's not okay.
The host of the show can't believe that someone could own a sports team without any business savvy, especially when they make such controversial comments about a player who has really brought attention to the league.
Come on now, that's not acceptable. I mean, honestly, imagine if one of the stands said the things that they were saying. What if they said it to your daughter, your wife, your cousin, your sister? Folks might be ready to fight, okay? So Caitlin, unfortunately for her, this is a group that is attached to her, not her asking this group to follow. It seems that they found a home in this fan base, thinking that that's where it was.
Recently, the owner of the Atlanta Dream made some eyebrow-raising statements, saying they want new fans who look and act a certain way. This wording suggests they might not be interested in white fans or families who support the WNBA, particularly those backing Caitlin Clark.
But recently, some things have shown where Caitlin recently liked a post by Taylor Swift, and it was supporting VP Harris. And on that post, all she did was like it. And this Caitlin stans group that I'm talking about, the stans have now split against Caitlin. They're actually going against Caitlin. I'm going to read some of the tweets. This is what they're saying to Caitlin now. I was just starting to finally pay some attention to the WNBA because somebody was actually worth watching, and then you caved. Another fan said, definitely should have stayed out of politics at Caitlin Clark. I love watching you, but now I refuse after seeing you support Taylor Swift and Kamala. Why did you like Taylor Swift's post endorsing Kamala? We thought you were like us. What's going on?
Her comments seem to reflect what Angel Reese said on her podcast, where she accused Caitlin Clark's fans of being sexist and racist.
So Caitlin had these big expectations when she came into the league, and she's clearly exceeding all of them, not on the court, not only on the court, but off of the court, being an ambassador for these brands.
While it's true that there are some problematic fans on both sides, it's not fair to label the entire fan base based on a few bad apples. Every fan group has its extremes, and the word fan actually comes from fanatic.
But something sinister is happening online with Caitlin's fan base and these stands that needs to be addressed. So all I'm saying is sports hate is okay. It's acceptable. It's actually welcome. We love the passionate fans. But some of y'all are taking it too far, man. Do better.
3 months ago, an article titled Top 2024 Rookies by ESPN's STS sparked outrage among basketball fans. Many consider it one of the worst pieces ever written about the sport, and its negative reception has not faded since its publication on June 6th. The article's poor reception was highlighted by a significant drop in subscribers, with a loss of 36. 2K by day's end. One of the most criticized selections was rookie number 9, Leanie Fight. With a per-minute performance ranking of just 5 out of 100, Fight's acquisition from the Chicago Sky raised eyebrows. Fans noted that she could have been a key player for the Sky, potentially ranking as their second best behind Kennedy Carter. Despite being 6'4" and boasting an impressive shooting percentage of 72% from beyond the arc, critics argue that she is primarily a shooter and question her overall impact on on the game, the discussion around her potential continues to generate debate among fans and analysts alike. Advanced stats have historically struggled to properly evaluate high-volume scorers, especially early in their careers. The ability to create shots on poor teams often precedes the ability to convert those shots at an efficient rate. However, in this case, the player's shooting percentages were not even that bad. In fact, she ranked 6th in assist rate at this stage of her career. The stats also don't account for passes to teammates who failed to score despite facing tight defense. Considering the defensive attention she faced, her averages of over 15 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds are impressive. Specifically, she was putting up nearly June 5th 16 while shooting 35.7% from the field and 29% on threes. Upon closer inspection, her shooting splits to begin her career were not as poor as initially thought. That was definitely a surprising choice. Coming in at number 5 is Julie Vano, who somehow ranks above Caitlin Clark, who only got a score of 14 out of 100. It's wild to think that at 31 years old, Vano is a rookie after playing in Europe and Australia last season. At this point in her career, her assist rate was only behind Alyssa Thomas, which is impressive. While I do think Vano has talent, I wouldn't consider her a starting point guard. She seems to fit better as a backup. For Belgium, she could shine in that. As a passer, she reminds me of Kelsey Mitchell, a player who can do some unexpected things. I saw on Reddit someone questioning the rankings, saying, Vano over Clark. There has to be some sort of troll. The most liked comment pointed out that while Vano has been playing well, she's still not better than Clark. It's kind of funny because Vano was averaging just 7 points per game at this stage. Now moving on to number 4, Rhea Jackson. She's one of the nation's most versatile scorers and one of only 9 players to produce 20 points per 100 possession. Unfortunately, her team struggled and her assist to turnover ratio is concerning. 3 assists to 16 turnovers is rough. Next up is Kate Martin, ranked as the 3rd best rookie in the WNBA. It's surprising to see her here, especially given that her team won with her starting recently, but it was largely thanks to a standout performance by Megan G. Sun, and Dallas was missing Arike Ogunbowale. Still, Kate Martin is indeed in the top 3. While she hasn't had a stellar performance overall, she's managed to earn consistent playing time on a team aiming for a 3rd consecutive WNBA title. The Las Vegas Aces started the season 4-4, and Martin has been shooting 35% from beyond the arc, making her one of the top rebounding guards in the league. However, it's odd that we judge guards based on their rebounding stats. At this point, she was shooting just 14% from 2-point range. That's pretty shocking. Better than Caitlin Clark's performance at that stage, but still not great. At number 2 is Angel Reese, who seems to be making headlines for everything except her actual gameplay. She's averaging 10.9 points, but hasn't even hit a double-double yet. It's hard to believe McDonald's hasn't capitalized on her name for a McDouble-double promotion. She did get ejected recently, which many felt was unfair, but her shooting percentage was only 33% at that time. Definitely not ideal. Finally, we have Cameron Brink at number 1, scoring 49 out of 100. In contrast, Caitlin Clark only scored a 16 out of 100. It's interesting to see Brink at the top, especially since she has had her struggles. One major area for improvement is her tendency to commit too many turnovers, which limits her role in the Los Angeles Sparks offense. At this stage in her career, she was often fouling and struggling to stay on the court. I really stand by my opinion, especially since Kelsey Mitchell kept dribbling and missing when Caitlin Clark wasn't on the court. Let's see what people are saying. Clark was named Rookie of the Month, and ESPN has her ranked 6th. There's talk of starting a protest. Justice for Caitlin Clark. Someone joked that Michelle McNutt must have made this ranking, suggesting that the less you do, the better your position on the list. To put things in perspective, Candace Parker won MVP, and Clark has more points at this point in the season than Candace did in her MVP year. How is that not enough for her to be recognized as a top rookie? Plus, she's 2nd in blocks. It's clear you can pick stats to support any argument. Thankfully, most people weren't agreeing with this ranking. It seemed to be mostly Reddit users who were on board with it. Overall, this list is definitely one of the worst I've seen, and looking back 3 months later, it hasn't aged well at all.